Group builds are a great excuse to try something different, and recently on my Discord server we had a go big or go home group build where the theme was build the largest kit in your stash, either by dimension or by scale. So with that in mind, I decided to go by scale. I'm pretty sure that this is the largest kit that I have by scale in my stash, being at 1/12 scale. Welcome back to the workbench. I'm Matt, this is Model Minutes, and join me today as I get stuck into the Bandai BB-8 and R2-D2 model kit. Let's get this one down on the workbench. I have built another Bandai kit in the past and I was very impressed with it, and I'm pretty sure my wife bought me this one as a gift a couple of years ago, but it was just kind of sitting on the shelf and not really a great deal was happening with it. So when the group build came along, it was time to get that one started. So as per usual, I'll put a list of products that I used during the build on the screen now to give you an idea of the kind of things you might want to go and get if you fancy having a go at this one for yourself. But you can probably notice there's not really a great deal here. This is kind of testament to how well Bandai have designed this kit. And speaking of how well designed it is, the kit comes with a variety of very precisely moulded parts, and these are even in multicolour on the sprues, which I find very impressive. Having not experienced this from any other manufacturer so far, this was something interesting to see. I have done a full unboxing on this particular kit if you'd like to take a deeper look at what you get inside the box. As usual, I'm going to cut the parts away from the sprue using my side cutters. I'm going to be starting on BB-8 first. Any leftover burrs were then carefully sanded away with a sanding stick. There isn't any flash in this kit though, so this is the only cleanup element that I had to do. And then, the assembly of BB-8 was relatively straightforward. You'll note that I'm not using any glue during this build, and that's because Bandai have designed this to be a effectively snap together kit. All of the parts are designed really well and have really fine tolerances, so they can just slide and click together. The first part of BB-8 to be completed is his head, and all of the parts come very cleverly designed in different colour plastics, so you don't even need to paint this either. But I will get a little bit of paint out for a few bits and pieces later on. With his head now complete, it was time to move on to the rest of his body. His body is made up in very much the same kind of way, layering the different plastic elements together to get the various colours of the design of his body. These various circle parts are then mounted onto a central hub. You can't really get these in the wrong places either because each one has a slightly different design for its mounting point. And then when that was done, these remaining panels finished off the ball of his body. Not a very complicated build, it's effectively like building a 3D puzzle. You do get the option to display BB-8 with his head attached to his ball body. However, there is also a stand which comes in clear plastic, so I assembled this, and then you can add your body to the lower part of the stand and the head to the top. This does give you the functionality to position the head in slightly different locations on the body or rotate the body to how you want to display it. With that done, it's time to move on to the completion of R2-D2. R2-D2 is a little more complicated, having a few more parts than BB-8. But again, they are really well designed, come in multiple colours and click together, building up in a very intelligent way to get the main colours of R2-D2 without having to resort to painting. As with BB-8, the first thing to complete was his head. There are quite a few little panels which need to be attached, and you do get various options within the kit depending on how you want to display the different tools that R2-D2 features. I effectively went for a clean build with him having all of his tools stowed internally, but you do get the choice of different ones if you'd like to display them outside of his body being used. With the head complete, I moved on to his legs. These again were built up in a similar way. I did have to read the instructions though to make sure that I actually got everything in the right place. And a little note about the instructions, mine didn't seem to be in English, which made it a little bit harder to follow, but with the help of a translation app, I managed to get pretty much everything in the right place. Another thing worth mentioning about this plastic is there are some pipes which need to be added onto the lower part of his legs, and these are moulded in a much softer plastic, so they are a little bit more flexible compared to the rest of the parts. With his two main legs complete, I then moved on to his body. Once again, simply inserting the relevant parts into their relevant locations. You can't really get it wrong. There is though his third leg, which can be stowed either internally or used on the outside of the body if wished. This was assembled and then inserted inside of the body at this point. There is a bit of functionality a bit later on where you can either have it on the outside, supporting him, or stowed internally. But I did find this to be a little bit stiff and a little bit difficult to actually implement. There are also some joints which go onto the side of the body, which when the main legs clip into do allow them to rotate to a certain extent. However, we do need to assemble the two little bases that come with the kit. These come as black pre-molded bases. There is a small part which needs to be added into the main floor. Not entirely sure what that is for. However, there is a little clip part which allows you to join them together. So if you have more kits in this particular series, you can display them all together in one place on your shelf. Now it's time to move on to the decals. A nicely printed set of decals is included in the kit. Alternatively, if you'd prefer to use stickers, there is a set of stickers as well. I opted to go for the decals, and in this build I'm going to be using micro scale set and sol simply to help them stick onto the surfaces. The micro set was brushed onto the relevant area where the transfer was going to be applied, and having soaked the transfers in warm water, they were then carefully slid off the backing paper and positioned as appropriate. Whilst it's really handy having some of these decals fill in the missing colours that may be needed, I did in hindsight realise that actually it may have just been easier to paint some of these elements instead of using decals, which took a little bit of work to get them to conform to the surfaces. And speaking of getting them to conform to the surfaces, I did have to apply a number of coats of the micro sol from the red bottle just to help them conform. But eventually I did get where I needed to go, and I was happy with the results. A small part that I did end up painting were the aerial masts, the tip and the base in a Vallejo black colour. I think there may have been a decal for this, but I just thought this would be a better solution. And then, with all of that done, I gave the entire model a coat of Humbrol 135 satin varnish. You can see that I've actually disassembled it ever so slightly, just so the varnish will go into all of the areas of the model. The point of this varnish is to help seal in those transfers and also try and protect the plastic from the next step. When that paint was dry, I made sure to add the various parts I'd removed prior to the acrylic coat, and then using a sponge, I added on some Vallejo gunmetal paint in a chipping kind of effect. This was applied to the various areas of both models that I thought would need a little bit of scratching up. I then used some Humbrol blue-grey enamel wash, but I thinned it down with some white spirit because I find it just a little bit too thick. This was then painted over all of the plastic parts, running into all of the recessed areas to help give an impression of dirt and grime, whilst also adding a bit of contrast between the raised and the recessed details. With that done and now dry, I used some Humbrol clear gloss varnish on the clear lenses of their eyes. This was because the satin varnish had clouded them up ever so slightly, and I wanted to bring them back to a more shiny finish. and then reattaching their various appendages, I'm calling this build complete. So, what do I think of this kit? Well, I'm actually incredibly impressed with it. All of the parts are incredibly well designed, and the fact that they come in multiple colours on the same sprue has absolutely blown my mind. I think in the entire build I had like one bit of flash that just needed a small amount of sanding away out of all of the various parts. That's effectively nothing. It's an incredibly well designed kit. I also like that Bandai includes stickers or decals depending on how you want to apply them to the model. But there was one thing that I found a little strange. I've used enamel washes on a lot of things during my modelling time, and I've used white spirit, and I didn't do anything particularly different to what I did here. However, despite the fact I even gave the models that protective clear coat of satin varnish, I did notice that the grey plastic, or the sort of silver metallic plastic that was used on R2-D2, ended up cracking as a result of reacting with the white spirit. Again, that's something I've never experienced before, but it was a little odd. These cracks aren't too noticeable, but when you get up close you can spot them. I did build this kit in a very simple way, not using any glue and simply just snapping everything together. Also, I didn't bother painting the majority of the parts. I thought that the moulded colour plastic was actually quite good. The white is the whitest plastic I've ever seen, and the other colours were pretty good as well. However, that metallic grey maybe isn't quite the most metallic I've seen, and that could potentially have benefited from being painted. But naturally, perfectionists out there may decide they want to paint everything a more appropriate colour. I think the simple amount of weathering that I did here was just enough to give them a slightly more three-dimensional look. Talking about the kit then, the information online about this model seems to be a little bit sketchy, but from what I can tell it's possible that this was moulded and released around the year 2015, which would coincide with the release of specific Star Wars films that came out at that time. It has been possible to get some of these kits in different boxings as well, paired with other models, or possibly on their own, but the dates are a little bit hard to pin down. As for prices then, well, it would seem that it's a bit hard to get your hands on these at the moment. Prices online seem to be around the £50 mark, and as for how much was paid at the time this kit was bought, I couldn't tell you because, as previously mentioned, this was a gift from my wife. On the whole though, I'm very impressed with this kit. The level of detail is amazing. The mold quality is fantastic, and the fact that everything's designed to snap together and you even have moving parts at the end of the build is a great touch. I'd look forward to getting some more Bandai kits in the future, and I'm glad that I had the opportunity to build this one as part of this recent group build. Don't forget that if you'd like to take part in our group builds, check out our Discord server for more information. But anyways, I think it's probably time to wrap this one up here. This Bandai kit was a fun little excursion for an afternoon, and with a little extra work can be made into a really nice looking model. It's just disappointing that the enamel wash reacted with the plastic and caused it to crack a little bit in a few places, but now that I know that, that's probably a technique that I'll avoid using on the next one. As always, let me know in the comments what you think of my build and if you enjoyed this video. Also, I'm open to any suggestions on any future builds you'd like to see in the future. As always, a quick shout out to my Model Club members for the extra support they give the channel. Massive thanks to these guys on screen. And if you'd like to join them, take a look at the links in the description to find out how. Also, there are other ways to help support the channel if you'd like to do so, and again, full information is underneath the video. Don't forget though that the best way to support the channel for free is by subscribing with notifications turned on. This will mean that you never miss a modelling video. Finally though, the last thing to say is a massive thank you to you for watching this one, and I'll see you on the workbench again next time. BB-8 and R2-D2 sync, because I know it's all ever so slightly out of whack, which is very frustrating. And then when all of that done, and then with all of that done, right, and then with all of that done, even though I went through the settings and I looked at the settings and I made everything be aligned, and now it's just not. I don't know what goes on with that, but it is what it is. Let's crack on and record this one. Yeah, I think that was everything. Got everything. Oh, I didn't mention my book. Go, I keep a log of everything in my journals. You can get these on Amazon. But as you can see, there was nothing really to write about this one because it was a really good kit. Yeah, I think, it took me 3 days actually. Date started on the 1st of April, the 1st of April, and I finished it on the 4th. But that's probably because I was busy doing other stuff. But it had 181 parts, so it did take a little while to put everything together, and I had to wait for stuff to dry, that I wash, for example. But yeah, that's it. That's all the notes I've got here. Like virtually no flash, one tiny little bit, very crisp, multicolour sprues. Fantastic. Yeah, check out my Amazon store for books to keep a track of all your work, and it helps me as well. It helps me out. Thanks so much. And I think we can call that video done. Wait, where's the stop button?